And now we're going to move on to our final panel for the day. And we've looked at where are we today, and we just looked at where do we need to go. And leading us in the conversation about where are the tools to get there is Garth Burton, who's the Vice President of Technology for ABS. So Garth, take it away.
Thank you, Carleen. And I would like to start off by recognizing the excellent presentations that we've had so far this afternoon. Certainly has set up this discussion very well when we think about where we're at, where we're going, and it perfectly positions us for a discussion on some of the tools to get there. And when we think about the tools, I like to think about different levers or buckets that are available to be able to be exercised to allow us to move forward. And certainly some of those levers would be from an operational perspective. Things that we can do as individuals, as companies, and as larger society to make changes. And we certainly heard about some of those in the last excellent presentations. Then the other aspect that we can think about is technology changes. And again, we certainly heard some of those very eloquently discussed in the previous sections. And when we think about those technology applications, some of those can be new applications to the marine industry, and some can be leveraging technologies and concepts from other industries and bringing them in to our operating world. So with that, I would like to kick off our final session today. We have 4 different presentations that are going to focus on both the operational aspects and some of those technology changes and shift changes within the industry. So to start off with, we're going to focus on operational aspects. And the first aspect that we're going to focus on is a very important topic with regard to plastics in the environment, and more specifically with some of the methods to reduce that plastic within the environment and specifically within the marine industry. Our first presenter is Georgios Kariazis, who is currently an associate with Reef Ship systems, and he's going to walk us through a presentation again addressing that reduction in plastics on board. Georgios, the floor is yours.
Good evening to everyone from Piraeus. I don't know if you can see me. First off, what a great conference that is. I'm very proud of being with everyone here at this NAMEPA virtual event. And let's hope that we can gather sometime soon, like before the pandemic. Next slide, please. Okay, so in a few words, what we do is that we stop plastic bottled water for vessels. We have a long background in the commercial shipping industry with strong technical expertise, and we're focusing exclusively on solutions and for systems dedicated to the shipping industry. Next slide, please. There were some challenges with plastic bottles on board. First of all, steel plastic bottle water is unknown for its bottling dates, when it was manufactured, and then the production process, filtering procedures, meaning that nobody knows how exactly the still water was produced just before entering the plastic bottle itself. Then we have storing and transport conditions, like getting inside the warehouses in very high temperatures, and then the water itself, the plastic bottle, being transported over by lorries to the ports and getting up to the vessels, and directly exposed to sunlight and other conditions. Then we have the costs for the shipping companies of ordering the plastic bottle and then shipping it to ports globally for each and every of their ships worldwide, carrying it, of course, on board, and then managing. Crew on board has to manage the plastic bottle itself. And after being used up, they have to maintain it and keep massive storage for plastic, for disposed plastic, and then they have to discharge it at each port. And this procedure goes all over again with exactly the same thing at the very next port for the next bottled waters. And then, of course, we have paperwork in each port for each vessel, plus, of course, that there are waste management charges that shipping companies have to pay, of course, for discharging empty plastic bottles. We have absolutely no environmental protection with plastic bottle. There are no certifications, excuse me, at all on steel plastic bottle water quality. Of course, there's absolutely no compliance with whatsoever the regulations. And there are many issues around this very hot topic. Next slide, please. So in a snapshot, what we do, we kill plastic bottled water. We protect crew and board seafarers, we protect the environment and the sea, and at the same time, we save money to shipping companies. So what we do is that we turn ships' evaporated water into an excellent and great drinking water on board. We deliver autonomous branded drinking water vessel production systems, and we constantly produce crystal clear drinking and cooking water on deep sea vessels. We're fully certified, and we're not only complying, but our systems are actually exceeding the industry regulations. We're using, of course, high quality components in order to achieve what we do achieve. We have more than 1,500 drinking water vessel systems in place on ocean-going vessels sailing worldwide, and we ship more than 150 new systems every month. Another point is that we're very proud because we're characterized as a best practice for drinking water by a very well-known global oil major during TMSA office audit on one of our clients' tanker fleets. Of course, to achieve that, we're doing continuous research, development, we're doing testing all the time. We're testing out everything before getting shipped from production all the way down to before getting shipped to our clients. Of course, we're supporting fully our maritime clients. Regarding the production capacities, we have really high production capacities of both marine systems and consumables. We have our own labs, chemists, of course, and engineers around as a backup to support everything that we do for the shipping industry. And of course, as I mentioned before, we're doing quality control for our solutions before they're getting shipped out. And to better support our maritime clients, we are having distribution centers from Piraeus, from Rotterdam, from Barcelona, Houston in the US, and we're covering the Middle East through the UAE. And finally, we're having distribution centers in Hong Kong and Singapore to cover the Far Eastern market and port calls. Next slide, please. Okay, so the benefits of our systems to the vessels and how they're helping out. So as an example, Infinity is being installed in the kitchen of the vessel, and in other cases also in the officer's mess room and the crew mess room. The water source to the system is coming out, is applied from the vessel's fresh water generated from the vessel's evaporated, where the vessel is produced at all times, constantly, freshly produced, excellent drinking and cooking water with very good crew acceptance by all crew nationalities. Of course, over here there are a few minor exceptions because there's some nations like some seafarers from Philippines, for example, who are used up to been using plastic bottle by the moment they were born because of very poor infrastructure in the public network. But then again, we leave nothing to chance. So even with those minor exceptions, we educate crew on board, we educate our clients, so we leave nothing to chance. Again, we're completely protecting the environment by stopping plastic bottle usage on board. And we're doing this by producing with our autonomous systems water for drinking on board, for drinking, for cooking, for preparing beverages, for washing vegetables, fruits, and so on. Of course, there is no more ordering, transporting, carrying around, storing, handling, and discharging still plastic bottled water. Another important fact is that apart from our systems having multi-layer filtration, which is another crucial part, our clients are seeing excellent lab results out of our drinking water generated on board. And last but not least, we're also offering fast return on investment, as our clients are saying, roughly more than 4 months, less than 4 months, excuse me, and excellent savings of between 45 to 65%, as clients are saying. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the systems we are delivering to the shipping industry. So first of all, our systems are applying to both retrofits and new build vessels. As an overview, we are delivering for every system multi-stage filtration. Our systems are having smart embedded functionalities. We're covering different vessel needs depending on how each shipping company wants to use our systems on board. Regarding installation and maintenance, it's easy. People on board do it on themselves with simple to follow color-handed booklet instructions and how to installation videos. And the systems are actually installed at various vessel locations. So as an example, we're having, as you can see on the top left corner, the Infinity. The Infinity, which can be, it's like a small tower PC, and is installed by shipping companies in the kitchen or in the mess room, as we see here, in the officer mess room or in the crew mess room. And Infinity is actually producing 380 liters of excellent water every day. And then we're having systems, autonomous systems, again, multi-stage filtration, like our K10 system, which is giving a massive 2,270 liters per day production, direct flow. And this is installed again in various vessels areas. And we're also having dispensers, again, for retrofits and new build vessels. And the dispensers are having the mentality of filling up the bottle and also the cap. And our dispensers are having, for example, the FC4000 that we see here out of a vessel installation, installed in various, again, locations on board, are giving a reservoir of cold and hot water of 5.5 liters of cold water, 4.5 liters of hot water with a storage tank of 16 liters. And then we're having a cooling capacity of 9 liters per hour and a heating capacity of 12 liters per hour. And we're delivering cold water from between 2 to 10 degrees Celsius and hot water of around 50 to 85 degrees Celsius. As I said, all our systems are doing multi-stage filtration, 7-stage filtration, including reverse osmosis, and of course UV lamp. And with the UV lamp part, which is the last stage, we're covering up MLC's last step. The way our system works is that by the moment we turn on the system's faucet, whether it is the Infinity's faucet or the K10 faucets, etc. At that very moment, if I'm a crew member and I get 1 liter of water, for example, at that very moment, the last step goes through where my water is going to go through the UV lamp. And last but not least, we are taking the sustainability on board vessels completely to the next level, whereby we are using, and we've introduced very recently in the market, special personal flasks, so that crew on board can carry them on board and thus completely eliminate plastic bottle on board, even the board itself. So crew are actually carrying the flasks provided by the shipping companies with them, and they get in their flasks the water from the Infinity faucet, from the K10 faucet, or from the dispenser's faucet. And this is something which is very crucial on top to handle the plastic bottle and actually completely kill the bottle itself. So very shortly, this is all that we do for shipping companies and for the shipping industry. Thank you so much again, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you so much, Georgios, for the presentation. Certainly solutions that offer the potential to reduce plastic on board and to save operating costs are certainly of interest to the industry and to the broader society. So thank you very much for that presentation.
Thank you very much, Gareth.
So building on that topic, we're going to continue the focus on operational related activities. And now we're going to have a presentation with regard to methods to protecting our coastline. And as you can see here from the slide, our next presenter is Melody Saunders-Brennan. Melody is, as listed there, CEO and co-founder of IntelliReef. I've had a look at her slides already, and I can assure you that they are interesting, and you're going to find them interesting. So Melody, I'll pass over the floor to you.
Thank you so much. Arlene, this is an astonishing day for everybody to think about. How do we work together to protect the marine environment? How in the world can we help each other protect this? Our IntelliReef's company, I'm not sure if the video will work, but if it will work, we're going to start with a video. Generally, when we go on stage, we ask everybody who's got their dive certificate or who's wearing their scuba gear, because we work underwater, and this marine environment is where we do our work. Let's see if this will play. Let's try this. Thank you, everybody. A lot of times when we are discussing the availability of good artificial reefs, people don't understand how big the market is. And this ocean is extraordinarily big. Your vessels certainly work inside this beautifully. And one of our targets is to help not only ocean health and coral health and fish abundance, but making this blue environment and the blue economy stronger. Next slide, please. So this is our market, and we work closely with the United Nations. We are presenting March 3rd and 4th at the UN. Go to our website, intellireefs.com. You can see it. Next slide, please. One of the problems, as we all know, is that there will be an incident. Ships will smack into a reef, things happen, and one of the risk mitigation processes that we are helping cargo companies and navies and people who are getting vessels and important cargo from one place to another, next slide please, is to put in reefs where they're needed. Obviously, we've lost 50% of the reefs worldwide. This means fishing problems, oxygen problems. People often ask me, why in the world did you get into this? And I say, in 2050, when my grandchildren are 30 years old, they won't have any oxygen. So it is our duty really to see how can we enrich this oceanic environment? How can we make it better? We originally had a company in Texas. We did architectural casting. We have a nanoscience laboratory, and coral biologists from all over the world said, what are you people doing? Why aren't you thinking about the oceans? Why don't you put your science where it's really, really needed? And that's exactly what we did. Next slide, please. We created what we call Oceanite. Coral reefs right now are made of minerals. They're made of pozzolanic minerals, volcanoes, and we have a nano-activated mineral mixture, and you can see all these tiny little holes. It's a pervious mixture, and it can absolutely bathe that area with a lower pH. A lot of times people put cement in the water. It's a pH of 12. Ours is a pH of 8.1, which is the pH of seawater. So we have an instant habitat acceptance from fish, crabs, sponges, and after barely a year, after the one spawning event, we had wild coral spawn attracted to our artificial reefs off of the natural reefs, which had been degraded. So our scientific proof has been really extraordinary. Next slide, please. This is what it looks like when we were putting prototypes in the water. Each one of these is a different mix design. It can be for certain species. It can be for pre-seeding with fish larvae, coral larvae. We're working on bases for kelp. And that's how real scientists can attack ocean problems and seriously make a difference. These guys are ex-Navy SEALs, and they do deployments for us. They're astonishing, and they're a bunch of rock stars that we really appreciate their help. But coastal infrastructure protection is what every island, every nation, everyone is going to have to get involved with at some point. If we can help the biological resilience increase, then you've really got a healthy atmosphere, no matter who's passing through it, whether it's a cargo ship, a cruise ship, other types of vessels, or the people who are diving off of Tahiti who really want to see a beautiful reef. So tourism and jobs, supporting fisheries and economies, these are what are so important about having a scientific method to change that economy in that coastal or island area. Next slide, please. Local benefits for the islands are astonishing. Recently, there were 7 innovators, blue innovators, that won what we call a Greening of the Islands Award for 2020. this Greetings of an Islands group are in the Maldives and Malta, and we're a member of what's called GLISPA, and it's the Global Island Group. And all of the islands get together and say, how can we make islands more resilient? And one of the ways is with an ecotourism project. You saw some of the ones that we had designed for an incredible resort property where they want free divers to have a free diving space. And those modules are made for fish to swirl around and to create an entire dive performance space. Fisheries and aquaculture, one of the benefits that we saw in the first 12 months of our prototype systems in the Caribbean is that we are feeding fish once every 8 seconds, both carnivores and herbivores. We finished and we're getting ready to publish. You'll see some coral magazines coming out in the next month or so. The different types of fish that fed off of these, because we had almost 100% coverage of microbiomes, no biofouling on our IntelliReefs. So islanders have a much increased fish population, octopus, and all kinds of astonishing creatures that finally had a home. One of the ways we work with the local islands is monitoring. We pay for boats to go out and monitor. We pay for coral research labs on the island. We have created through our foundation a global island education system for 5th and 6th graders for island populations all over the world. It's really beautiful, and we will be presenting that at the UN in the next month. Next slide, please. One of the projects we're working on now is for DARPA. They have asked for something quite astonishing. They want our military bases and all of the coastlines in the United States to have a massive coastal protection system. And on top of that, they want absolute coral biodiversity. They want increased fish, substrates, attraction, settlement, feeding of all kinds of creatures. And we are designing this. We have some extraordinary engineered products for this, the bigger modules, which will help erosion, which is really a problem everywhere in the world. We're losing sand, we're losing our coastlines, and if we don't stop it, then there will be lots of trouble for coastal properties. Next slide, please. Yes, this is one of the benefit slides. You can kind of see what it looks like going in the water. It actually looks like, we call it an ocean rice crispy because it's ocean safe aggregates, and it's held together by science, really by advanced nanomaterial science. And the biodiversity you can see on the right with all of the CCA. In the coral business, we call CCA, it's crustose coralline algae. When you see pinks all over the reefs, that's a healthy reef. It's ready for the next spawning event. It's ready for building of a completely healthy ocean environment. And corals are strange creatures. They're quite brilliant. They can hear, they can smell. And so when they are spawning, which is once a year, they're getting together going, yo, it's Friday night, midnight, be there. And when they have these spawning events, the fertilized spawn are floating through the ocean and they're looking for a house, and they're looking for cues from fish. They're looking for activity. They're looking for worms that are happy and sponges that are happy. And it was astonishing to see that very shortly after we put our substrates in the water, they had a spawning event and the corals chose our reef. So dollar for dollar in a return on investment, having the wild coral come to a healthy reef can also help the degraded reefs have a little breather. Many of the marine biologists who have studied this said, IntelliReefs is really giving Mother Nature a time to heal, a time to kind of say, okay, let's take a break here. How can we get this ocean and coral community pulled back together? this guy here is called a squirrelfish, and he's very territorial. And we put down these small modules, and the fish were taking a nap on them the day after we put them in. And the Nature Foundation and different monitoring agencies were like, wow, we've never seen this before. This is such an immediate acceptance from the ocean community. And that squirrelfish, who doesn't usually come out, they don't like open space, but they really are attracted to these, as well as some of the other fish and all kinds of ocean creatures. So it was really exciting for marine biologists and coral people to say, wow, we actually really have something, and advanced science can actually help our entire ocean health communities. Next slide, please. This is our foundation, ReefLife Foundation. And these are a bunch of the Navy SEAL guys, and they're helping us put in another reef prototype. And when we do a prototype, it's really a test. It's like a scientific playground. This morning we had 50 marine biologists, ocean engineers, wave attenuation experts, and we're all trying to figure out what is the next phase of ocean health. How can we help this ocean heal herself? And what are little steps that all of us can do? What are big steps that all of us can do? And if you go to our website, reeflifefoundation.org, there's all kinds of ways you can get involved. And one of them is this educational coral series for island communities. And Carlene was telling us about this morning, and it's really true. And that's why NAMEPA is doing such a wonderful job at education. It's if you live on an island and you're a child, a lot of times your mom says, there's sharks out there, it's a little bit scary, I want you to stay on shore, and we'll let, I don't want you out in the ocean. And it's tourism and people that are not from that island who go stay there and really enjoy more of the island's beauty underneath the water. And the United Nations was asking us, how can you create the most engaging educational series for 5th and 6th graders all over the world? And we're working with Studio Pigeon, an incredible animation studio that works for all the big guys globally, but they are animating this. And the children are diving, and there's this wise octopus that they can go ask questions about the ocean. So that might be something you would want to get involved in. It might be something that you would want within your organization to promote, because everyone in this ocean space is really trying to protect our marine environments, and this is one way you can help. Cyan Planet, that's another one of the cool projects we're doing. We're doing a Coral City video game. And we've never had a video game before that actually you can build a coral city on that video game. It's another educational tool. You don't have to speak English. You can speak Tongan or some beautiful Australian dialect, and it's all an educational part of how do we help the oceans be better, because each of us have some decisions to make every single day. Next slide, please. This is the new system that we're launching. We call it Reef Ship, and each one of these modules is 48 inches by 48 inches by 6 feet tall. And they have pathways in between them for fish to fly through. When you're on our website, you can see this movie. And every one of these modules has a system for different types of corals, different types of creatures. Some of these marine creatures only like a 45-degree angle. Other creatures only like shade. There are some corals who do not want to be out in the sunshine. So this is a metropolitan city like Manhattan, and it has indigenous creatures from every type of marine community. And this is the next phase of what we're putting in the water because our prototypes were so successful. Now that we have the science, the designers and the ocean engineers have a chance to say, how do we actually put an entire city underwater to build areas for every type of creature? So now we're getting involved in different types of fish scientists and not only coral, but algae that are positive. And how do we grow certain algae that only like to be in the shade that actually are for medicines? So we have a global manufacturing network. And we also, I'm so glad I was on this thing today. We're going to talk to the Jason and the Blue Tech people in Boston, because we certainly fit within this Blue Tech innovation atmosphere. And if you go to the website, you'll be able to see one of these films of this in action, and that'll be a lot of fun. Next slide, please.
Melody, I'm sorry, but we're going to have to end here. And this is unfortunate because this is where the industry can get involved with you. But
Okay.
maybe you can wrap up in 15 seconds.
Sure. If you want to help deliver IntelliReefs around the world, that would be so helpful. We're looking for shipping and cargo. If you can put reef ships where you can mitigate damage and have that as an insurance policy, like a fire extinguisher, we know there's going to be an incident, and how can we do good risk management and have these reef modules on the routes that the cargo ships go to. Thank you, everyone. Bless you. Let's have a healthy ocean, and we appreciate the time. Thank you, Carlene.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that presentation. I certainly learned quite a bit over the last few minutes. I was particularly interested to hear about the fact that the coral was built specifically for the site, the species, and the function. And I'm sure if we have time towards the end, there'll be lots of questions on your particular presentation. So thank you again. So moving on from the coral topic, we're going to delve into another very interesting topic, an item that was brought up during some of the earlier discussions this afternoon, and specifically with regard to fuels. So our next presentation is going to be from Peter Lindsay, who's going to walk us through some of the breakthroughs in fuel chemistry, obviously a critically important topic. So Peter, I will hand it over to you.
Hi, Garrett. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly, yes.
Great. Just to get us back on time, do you need this to be 8 minutes or 10 minutes, or what do you need it to be?
12 minutes.
Okay, got it. Great. Welcome, everybody. Thanks for hanging in there in this, and thank you again for Carlene and your team at NAMEPA for this incredible conference. I've learned a lot today. And even in the last one, Melody, thank you for yours. It's a great reminder that all that we're doing in terms of carbon is not just for atmospheric health, it's for the oceans and reef health as well. Like many of you, I've got a long career in maritime, about 35 years running now in the marine and freight and energy markets. The last 10 years specifically focused on bunker fuels, running a trading operation. And really the last 10 years has been about the battle of reducing the sulfur. And now we've got another bigger problem on our plate. I think it was said earlier that 2020 was going to look like a walk in the park as we take on global carbon. Let's go to the next slide if we can. Great. Hang on. Are we there on the slide? Gareth, help me out here. I don't know if we're on that slide I'm looking for now.
Yeah, so we're on the slide with the globe.
Okay. Great. Oh, okay, there we go. So carbon reduction and climate change, as it's already been spoken to. I'm not going to go too deep into the slide because so much of it's been covered, but ESG and climate change is on every political, economic, and social agenda. Now it's just about #1 item on every major corporate board agenda in most industries. And we're seeing it from all sides, the public sector and the environmental, the legal, of course, now the invisible hand of the market. I boiled down the top headline numbers here. Randy kicked us off this morning with it, so I'm not going to go too far into it. Essentially, carbon has been extended to mean CO2 equivalent, which also brings in the most impactful gases that make up the greenhouse gas family. You can see here that shipping owns about 3% of the global carbon contribution, which is part of a group they're calling hard to abate industries. Most of global transportation's in that category, as we heard, because it's ubiquitous, it's capital intensive, and without a quick fix from the industry structure. IMO, as we've heard already, has got two sets of goals out there, one for 2030, one for 2050. I'll ask you to keep an eye on that 40% carbon number that we're going to hit inside this decade, and we'll come back to that later. Next slide, please. So we've seen a little bit of this mentioned today. I call this my hope slide. I've been in the industry long enough that I've got the experience, but I also have the hope of what's coming. We've touched on new technologies, engine-wise and fuel-wise. The left side of this chart kind of talks about what we're doing today and then where we got to end up tomorrow. I think and of course in the middle, the only thing standing between today and tomorrow is time and money. Most of shipping today, as we know, is that we're relying on the internal combustion engine, the great reliable, long historied diesel engine for the most part, that's burning diesel and heavy residual fuels. And some of the new ideas we have even still continue with internal combustion, but with different fuels like LNG and biofuels and methanols and that. Other ideas take us out of the internal combustion into electric power plants, and we even see a chance at even seeing nuclear again, which is not something that's been attempted outside of military today. Again, I see this slide and I have a lot of hope. We're going to solve this problem. Hopefully inside those timelines, we as an industry will figure it out. But it also begs the question as to what we can actually do today to start getting that direction. We're not out of the fossil fuel business or internal combustion engine business anytime soon. So how do we make an impact now that gets us headed towards the 2030 goals? Next slide, please. I think this statement from a major engine OEM testifying before Congress a couple of years ago pretty much sums it up. We've got just to make our current energy stream that much more efficient and environmentally friendly. He talks about making diesel and diesel engines cleaner and more efficient. That would also imply that the best way to get lower carbon output from fuels is to simply burn less of it, get more out of the engine. And that begs the other question, how do we do that? How do we get more out of diesel engines? Next slide, please. So a couple slides, I won't get too deep into theory here, but for the engineers on board, my friend Bob Hawk out there and Matson, I know you're listening, but this is talking about the diesel engine from history to now. At best, we're at 75% theoretical maximum. You're going to lose some stuff because of heat loss and friction and inertia. So for every drop of diesel, we're only going to get theoretically 3/4 of the energy that's in it out of it. But in reality, this is really what we're getting today. Cars and trucks you see in the 25 to 30 range, trains, larger engines, slower speed, and ships, surprisingly to me, are actually the most efficient diesel engines that we have running today. Large, slow speed, two-stroke. We're getting a lot out of those, but we're still far away from the theoretical maximum. Now, we put billions of dollars into engine development, injector design, airflow, turbocharger, electronic fuel control systems, things that'll push us closer to that 75% theoretical efficiency maximum. But what have we done about fuel? What have we touched on fuel? What have we done to improve diesel fuel, the stuff that we're burning over time? Not a lot. Next slide, please. So again, there's three things you can do with fuel, any fuel to make it better. You can make it start to ignite exactly when you want it. You can make it flow better through the engine and the injectors, and you can make it combust more completely and extract every bit of energy that you can from it. And that's really what we've been working on. Improving cetane levels far above what's offered in a diesel fuel out there today. Improving lubricity to make up for the sulfur that we pulled out for environmental purposes. There was a trade-off there. And most importantly, where we really put the time in is on this third one, the catalyst. Controlling the combustion for maximum gain and lower emissions. And we do that by the introduction of a cutting-edge catalyst, a metal-based oxide, which controls the entire process. It adds oxygen later in the combustion phase and burns the fuel longer and more complete, thereby getting more energy out of every power stroke of a drop of diesel. Let me show you what this looks like graphically. Next slide. Again, not to get too technical on you, but this is a combustion diagram with respect to an engine and piston angle. The red line is the typical combustion stroke. You see that that makes a very sharp peak as the fuel ignites and combusts, and then it incurs a sharp drop off in pressure beyond top dead center, losing power as the fuel is expended. When you add a catalyst, a specially tuned and formulated catalyst to this, it changes this diagram somewhat. It starts the ignition a little bit sooner, but it modulates the oxygen so you don't hit that peak temperature and pressure, which is where NOx gets formed, and then releases billions of oxygen molecules shortly after that peak to push harder and longer and burn up more of the remaining fuel, keeping a higher power curve into the finish. The difference between those two areas, the one you lose versus the one you gain, is about 10%. The lower peak temperature results, as I said, in less formation of the NOx. And then by burning more of the fuel, you get less soot and carbon monoxide because it's all been turned completely into CO2 in the combustion. The numbers that come out of this equation are noteworthy. Next slide, please. In our most recent case studies, in which we've addressed all different types of diesel engine in different industrial applications, you can see on this chart that first column. And to the right, we've got different pickups on reductions of CO and NO2 and the other NOx family members. We pick up around 10% on average in fuel consumption. Next slide. Study we did on emissions out of one of our tests that was run on a dynamometer, a 12-day test we ran down in New Orleans on about a 3,000 horsepower tugboat engine. You see a simultaneous drop in both carbon monoxide and NOx, around 20 and 15% each, and a substantial decrease by half in the opacity of the particulates. That makes sense, that's the smoke. Using the CO2 equivalent weightings of these gases, plus the reduced carbon dioxide from burning less fuel, we come out with about a 15% reduction in greenhouse gases. Now let's go back. Let's remember that the goal by 2030 was 40%, and here's 15% that we can deliver today without a single dollar of capital investment on engine modifications. Next slide, please. So we've been asked, how has this come about now? And why haven't we seen something like this before? And the short answer is technology. And the longer addendum to that, of course, is necessity. We need this type of bridge technology today if we have any hope of reaching the goals by 2030 and certainly by 2050. So 10 years ago, we could not make an oxygen catalyst like this due to the particle size, the surface area, and the ability to tune it for oxygen release and modulation of that combustion. But due to nanoscale chemical technology now available, we can make a catalyst with a particle size like 3 to 5 nanometers in size, enough to enable it to become part of the fuel chemistry and react with it properly. So I'd say that this development in itself is here just about in time to give us more options on how to attack consumption and emissions. Next slide. Gareth, I'm on 9 minutes. Am I still good for a minute or two? Okay.
You're doing perfect. Perfect.
Great. So here's a quick look at our roadmap and what industries that we're well into and where you can expect to see this in the maritime. We've been very active in the energy production sector. Those are very fuel intensive operations. We've got 1 million engine hours already in the fracking and drilling fields, mostly with Caterpillar, Cummins, and MTU engines, and excellent results that you saw earlier. The short line rail industry is growing for us. We've had about 500,000 engine hours there, and we're growing every quarter. Those engines are very similar in size and power to tugboat engines. So marine is pretty exciting right now. We're running live on a drill ship. You see pictured there in the lower left. That's a drilling rig, a ship. We've got power, fuel, and emissions data being satellite transmitted back to us as we speak now for the next 14 days. And that will culminate into a large data study and review of the results with our customer. After that, we move to an ATB tug running in the Gulf of Mexico, an EMD 710, about a 3,000 horsepower engine, a couple of them, in fact. And then we move out to the West Coast to go onto a tugboat, again, another 3,000 horsepower plant, twins. And then hopefully later on this year, we'll end up in a larger Wärtsilä or MAN engine that's running in the Alaska trade. We're taking more product trial requests now in the marine sector than we have before, and we're happy to entertain more, of course. So next slide, I think that's it. I know this is all a bit to take in, but putting it simply, this is a strong move forward for us as an industry to reduce fuel consumption and emissions at the same time without compromising power, and also without a single dollar of capital investment. All the pain points that the industry faces at this moment, this is one we can actually do something about immediately with bottom line results, allowing the operators to focus on some of the bigger challenges of the new regulations coming into trade. So with that, I'll hand it back to Gareth for any Q&A and wrap up. And thanks again to NAMEPA. Great job, folks.
Perfect, Peter. Thank you for that presentation. And certainly discussing the solutions to today's problems are certainly very valid and certainly a good component of our presentation this afternoon. So thank you for that.
Thanks.
Moving on from the chemistry of the fuels, our next topic is certainly another one of great interest, and I'm sure the audience here are going to find it of significant relevance. The presentation here is entitled The Nuclear Option, and is very much a focus on alternatives associated with nuclear power. And our presenter here is Mikhail. Mikhail is Managing Director and CEO of Core Power. So Mikhail, I'll pass it over to you.
Thanks very much, Garth. Can you hear me?
I can hear you perfectly.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, nice to be here. Colleen and everyone, thanks for inviting me. I guess I've got the graveyard slot, and hopefully that means you're leaving the best to last. I was going to talk about downhill skiing, but I'll talk about advanced atomic instead. Could I have the first slide, please? Is the first slide up? I can't see it.
It's not up as of yet, but I believe the team are working hard behind the scenes to make some magic happen.
Well, I'll start talking then. What we're talking about here is probably the greatest challenge that this industry has faced since it went from sail to steam in the 1840s, finally, after 20 years of trying out different types of steam engines. And I think it's reflecting a lot of what's been said earlier today. A lot of speakers have said this, everything from 2020 is a walk in the park to we've got to desperately search for some solution that'll take us there. Referencing one thing that was said earlier, which Bill Gates has just been out saying to a lot of people, is that climate is like a tub. It's filling up, continues to fill up. We can slow down the filling of this tub, but eventually it'll run over unless we stop filling it, and unless we find a way for then what's in there to drain back out again, for nature to take its course. So I think what we're really looking for here is what happens in the long term. What happens as an industry, not just an industry, but really the whole energy system around us, because shipping isn't necessarily on its own here. We are a hard to abate target simply because ships are so large, especially the and far out at sea. Becomes a very hard thing to do. We can't switch power providers like land-based industry can. So it's really a question here of finding something that works differently. And the answer to this, and I've been in the shipping industry for 30 years now, and looked at this in many different ways. The answer, whichever way you look at it, actually, it sits in the field of atomic. But it's not nuclear the way that we know it. It's not conventional nuclear, the old nuclear, the nuclear that was invented during the Second World War, took off in the 50s and 60s, part of our Cold War heritage. The conventional old nuclear that we have in power stations and naval vessels and icebreakers. This is old technology. This is technology which is largely inefficient. It works very well, of course, but it's not suitable for commercial marine. It really isn't. And there's several reasons for that. What we're really talking about here is an advanced atomic technology that is radically different from anything else that's gone before, and that sort of solves the problems that we've got to solve. And in particular, it's issues around the safety and the security and the efficiency, so basically the production of waste that comes from these machines, and whether we can make them last long enough for them not to be refueled for the lifetime of a ship. And if we can achieve that, and we can have a liquid fueled reactor technology, which effectively leaves a very small waste footprint and creates fully electric ships that sail without any emissions whatsoever, for a lifetime, we can change the way things work in this industry. I still can't see any slides up there. Are any slides showing?
We currently have the slide with your picture on it.
Right. Are there any other slides? Can I have the next slide?
They're coming up now, Mikhail.
Okay, because I can keep on talking, but if there are no illustrations behind it.
We're talking about advancements here, Mikhail.
Right. Okay. Maybe we're ahead of our time here, Carleen.
Oops, he's now muted.
Let me give you a couple of points. So, in terms of the the carbon emissions that come from our industry. Let's boil this down to where it really comes from. There are 100,000 ships over 100 gross registered tons in the global fleet at the moment. But actually, if you boil this down to its core essentials, there are approximately 17,000 ships that are responsible for just over 80% of all the emissions in our industry. 17,000. 17,000 out of 100,000 responsible for about 80% of all emissions. It's a Pareto rule, 80-20 rule. Of these 17,000 ships, 7,000, approximately 7,000, trade on long-haul sea passages. These are the larger ships. These are the VLCCs. These are the VLOCs. These are the ultra-large container ships. These are the large gas carriers, etc. And these ships are largely unsuited to the synthetic fuels that we're talking about, in this industry today. And then we got approximately 10,000 ships. Thank you. We got approximately 10,000 ships which are where it's possible to use some of these low carbon fuels, hydrogen-based, green ammonia, green methanol, etc., because of the relatively short sea passages that they have. This is to do with the low energy content and the low specific gravity of these synthetic fuels that are out there. So really, it comes down to these 17,000 ships, and that's the core fleet that we have to ideally go after. The 7,000 largest is really the hardest of all of these. That's really where we think that there's going to be a big thing. If you look at I don't know if you can see on this slide here, but I'll illustrate it in a different way. Next slide, please. No? No, next slide.
So what I'm currently seeing is a slide powering large ships.
Okay, I'm not seeing that. Okay, can you go back then to slide 4, please?
That's the MSR slide.
Yes.
So I'm currently seeing the slide on MSR.
Very good. Okay, let's do that then. So the technology we're talking about here is called the molten salt reactor. And a molten salt reactor is a very different type of atomic reactor, a power core, if you like, than a conventional nuclear. It's very different in several ways. One in particular is that it has a fuel efficiency which is almost the opposite of what you find in a regular conventional nuclear reactor. So in a conventional nuclear reactor, you will have fuel that goes in, solid fuel that goes in, and the amount of the fuel that's converted to energy, or rather the energy that's extracted from that and used, is just under 1%. So it means that 99% of the fuel that goes in comes out as nuclear waste. And of course, we have to store that for a long time. Not necessarily a problem in itself, but it's got a certain public sort of image around it. With a molten salt reactor, we do it the other way around. We've got a liquid fuel that's circulating around inside a core. It's a closed system. It's tamper-proof. Nothing comes out of these particular reactors at any time. And the efficiency of the fuel burnup that we have inside there is north of 95%. So it's now, at the moment we're modeling at 96. We reckon we can get it to 98% efficiency, which means that all of the energy in there, and this is 2 to 3 million times more energy dense than what we find in our fossil fuels, our diesels, and our coals, and our natural gases, etc. We burn up 95% of that. Means that we're using extremely little fuel to produce very large amounts of energy. And because so much of it is burnt up, it leaves extremely little waste. Think of it like a car. If you've got a car that uses 1 gallon of gasoline per mile, you've got a huge amount of waste being emitted into the environment. If you have one that does 100 miles per gallon, you've got much less waste per, if you like, energy use that's emitted into the environment. So that's really one of the key things with this machine. And also that means that we can lower the, if you like, the power density of the reactor itself and make it last for a lot longer. So we can fuel these machines to last for 20, 25, even 30 years before they need refueling. So effectively what we could do is we could have these on board large ships, and we can have them effectively fueled for the lifetime of that ship. So no stopping for refueling, no need to eco speed or anything like that. And of course, there's no emissions at all. It doesn't emit anything at all. The typical power rating we're looking at here is sort of 15 to 25, sometimes up to about 50 megawatts per machine. So you can have these machines which are, mass assembled, factory made, if you like, so single design, single license, robotic repetition of the manufacturing process, very high degree of accuracy and workmanship in these. And you can have them in a modular fashion. So if you need more power, you'll put more reactors in, you'll have more turbines, etc., and you'll create power systems out of that. They've got very few moving parts. It's got a liquid fuel that moves around it, as opposed to a nuclear reactor, which has a solid fuel assembly. This is a liquid fuel. So it's effectively, atomic fuel that's infused in a salt, which is kept. It's a very specific type of salt, but it's kept very hot, and it flows almost like water inside the reactor, and keeps on, creating that chain reaction, which releases the heat, which we then take out through turbines and into an electrical system. Because of the extreme efficiency of the burn-up of this fuel, and because of the fact that the liquid fuel means that there is no real pressure inside these machines at all, it's got no more pressure than you will find in your kitchen sink, means that we don't need all of these phenomenally powerful containment vehicles around, or containment structures around the reactors, like we have on nuclear reactors. You think of something like Fukushima, these massive great domes around it to prevent any hydrogen explosion, which is what you'd find in these old-fashioned nuclear accidents. Things like that are simply not possible with this technology. So as a result, we believe that we can get the cost of manufacturing and the cost of these machines down to a very competitive level. And the way that we model this with a leasing model, with leasing the power over the lifetime of the ship, is competitive with bunkers at about $270, $280 per ton. And that's flat. There's no volatility in that. Can I have the next slide, please? Are we on the next slide? Can you tell me, Garth? Because I can't see.
We're on the world's leading MSR consortium.
Very good. Okay, so this technology is now being supported by the US government. We're a team of 4 companies. That's TerraPower, which is owned by Bill Gates, Southern Company, which is one of the big US utilities listed on the New York Stock Exchange, Orano, which is the French national nuclear fuels company, effectively, and the French taxpayer, and us at CorePower, teamed together to build this technology. And we applied to the US government's US Department of Energy for an inclusion in something called the Advanced Reactor Demonstration Program, which is a big program launched a couple of years ago by the Department of Energy. And we were awarded, like a podium finish, with a $90 million award. It's a $170 million program to build the first power cores here, $90 million from the US government, and we are then funding the remaining 80%. Privately, but between the 4 of us. Our role as CorePower in this whole thing is really the maritime readiness, the full maritime demonstration of this technology, the power conversion systems, the control systems around this, and as well as the regulatory framework to get this out into the market. Can I have the next slide, please? Garth, just give me a nod if it's there.
Yes, making synthetic fuels.
Very good. So we believe that the first deployment of this particular technology is most likely, the lowest hanging fruit here is to have an FPSO style floating production plant of clean hydrogen, green hydrogen, which is also then converted into green methanol and green ammonia. So as you see on the notes, so it's green MEHO and green NH3. 2 green fuels that have been talked about. We can have an FPSO, let's say the size of between a Suezmax and a VLCC, which will produce somewhere between 2.5 to 3 million tons per year of these green fuels, effectively using water from the sea and air from the nitrogen from the air as its component to make the ammonia. That's what ammonia is. It's nitrogen and hydrogen. So a certain amount of a huge amount of energy that goes into the process to make those particular fuels, but it can be done in floating production. We believe that will serve as a very viable and extremely environmentally friendly and also very economical way of producing these green fuels without, if you like, degrading environment, etc. The potential here, of course, is that we can bring the cost of green hydrogen right the way down to, below $2 per kilo or $2,000 per ton. Currently, sort of $8 to $10 for green hydrogen. Obviously, grey hydrogen, brown hydrogen is much cheaper, but that's not what we're looking for here. Which means an ammonia price around the sort of $600 to $650 per ton, which we think fits in roughly with where the industry is expecting it to be. Now, if we can move to the next slide, please. Garth?
We have the powering large ships.
Okay, so then as we've deployed these floating production installations, if you like, in terrestrial waters, let's say starting in the United States, and it's serving then the Jones Act fleet, it's serving urban transportation, hovercraft, ships that are coming through US waters for bunkering, can all be served by these particular installations. We can sit along the coast, offshore somewhere. Similar systems can then be deployed as an exportable product, in the UK, European Union, Japan, Korea, other friendly nations, if you like, where these can operate. And we can then see a much more unified and uniform regulatory environment for this technology between those countries, because now they've all got the similar sort of technology operating in their waters, and we've got a uniform insurance, a sort of safety, security, and if you like, a sort of general tie-in with national regulations on operating these kind of assets. So that having that unified means that we then open up for trade between those countries, between those regions. So the very largest ships, which are the hardest ones to decarbonize here, we can literally take these reactors and we can then build them into ships. We can put them into new buildings. We can retrofit existing very large ships with this, and we then move to this advanced atomic powering of these ships, fully electric ships with no need to slow down. Let me give you an example of what that really means. If we're using, say we take, say Brazil joins in with this, and we do an iron ore run from Brazil up to North Asia, and we're doing a Cape-size 180,000 tons of iron ore, Brazil to North Asia, Baltic route C3, 60-day round voyage approximately. If we look at the fuel consumption as it is today, we're using about 3,700 tons of 380. Price at the moment is sort of around about the $500 mark. It was around 300 a few weeks back before oil started moving up, but it's fluctuating, it's volatile. We can expect some carbon pricing to come on top of that, so to try and level the playing field with the expensive synthetic fuels. And in the course of that 60-day voyage, we will have released about 11,200 metric tons of carbon dioxide and carbon dioxide equivalent greenhouse gas emissions. So it's rather a lot of emissions just for a 60-day voyage. You can multiply this up, if you like, on a 25-year lifespan of a Cape-size carrier, and then you have the sort of environmental footprint of it, if you like. If we switch to green ammonia, we would be using about 8,800 metric tons of ammonia because it has much lower specific gravity, it has a much lower energy content. We use almost 2.5 times as much ammonia to get the same power out of an engine, and we have to store a huge amount of it on board because of the low gravity of it. The price is equivalent then, so about 2 to 2.4 times the price of the 380, hence the carbon pricing on top of the 380 to try and level the playing field between the two. But environmentally, we're releasing no more than about 90 tons of CO2, plus, of course, NOx and various other things that come with it. We're using the marine molten salt reactor to do the same job. This is under modeling. We would use 1.1 kilos, 1,100 grams of fuel for this particular voyage. That's to move 180,000 tons for 60 days. Leasing equivalent-wise, the price of this is under $300 per ton. It's about $275 to $280 per ton is what we're looking at now with current pricing. And it would leave, of course, a final waste footprint from this, no emissions in the air whatsoever, but about 1.1 kilos equivalent of the fuel that we've used. What this really means, and think about this, and here's a revolutionary bit, the 1.1 kilos on this particular thing is equivalent to 1 gram of fuel per megawatt day. 1 gram of fuel per megawatt day with 0 emissions is what this technology is capable of doing, which is why we think this is the way things are going to, this is going to come. We're developing the technology. It is going to be demonstrated and tested over the next few years. And obviously then we're going to start gradually putting it into marine environments and demonstrate how this will do. I think at the end of the day, it comes down to economics. So if we go to the next slide, please, which I think is going to be one of my very last ones. I'll let you go after this. Am I on the next slide, Garth?
Not quite there yet. Solving the big riddle.
Well, there you go. That's the one. So if we look at what we need to do, we need to cut 40 to 50% of the carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions from the industry. So we're looking at cutting somewhere between 400 and 500 million tons of emissions out of our industry, sort of, on a grand scale, roughly that. If we take those 17,000 ships and we convert a certain amount of them to green fuels, and we put a certain amount of them onto this propulsion system, this is over time, of course, we've got a market universe here for about 20,000 marine molten salt reactor power cores, which is a very small amount, which would then effectively cut close to 500 million tons of emissions out of this industry. But it's not really about that. It's really about the economics. This is an industry that, especially on the large ships here, that never plays really as a team sport. I mean, people are collaborating now. They're talking about how we can get there in the end as a team, how we can get there together. But at the end of the day, this is the most, the sectors of our industry that are the most exposed to the hardest competition, the most brutal capitalist rules that apply in tankers and in dry cargo and container shipping, as well as in gas and other forms of shipping here, where really it's really the most efficient and the most efficient technology that can give you the fastest service for the most economic price. It's the one that wins. It's the way that steam took over from sail, it's the way diesel took over from steam, and it's the way the next generation of energy technologies will take over from what we have today. So we believe that going backwards into wind, going backwards into hydrogen-based fuels, etc. It's a nice transition to try and get us used to this whole thing. But at the end of the day, we're going to have to move forward, and this, for the biggest ships, is the one that answers that competitive riddle as well. So we're looking at about 20,000 machines that uses about 3,300 tons of atomic fuel per year. That's the total consumption at full power of these machines to power 17,000 ships and cut half of the emissions out of this. That is also basically the waste footprint that we're left with, 3,300 tons. Now you can think of this as about 20 times the weight of water, so you can reduce the volume by a huge amount, and you're looking at something that you could store underground until it sort of becomes palatable to take back out. You can talk about a few hundred years rather than not anything else. So compared to the kind of emissions and death rates and everything else we're hearing about from fossil fuels today, we believe this is by far the most sustainable solution to go forward. And I think I will leave it there, Garth. Thank you very much for having me. I hope you found that interesting. And yeah, back over to you, Garth.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that presentation. I certainly find it interesting, and I think I can speak for the rest of the audience and say that they find it interesting as well. We have some time for a few questions. If anybody would like to raise their hand or type a question into the chat box, we can certainly take it. Just reflecting back for a few minutes on what we've heard over the last 4 presentations. So we heard a solution to the challenges for onboard vessels, specifically with regard to the elimination of plastic and plastic bottles on board, and certainly a viable solution to bring that about. We heard a warning with regard to the current state of the health. I think I had heard that there was 50% of the reefs had been lost thus far. There was also a warning with regard to Melody's, the condition when Melody's grandchildren are growing up if we don't take action. And we had heard some of the potential solutions that she can bring to the table to mitigate some of those challenges. Then we heard from Peter, certainly with regard to the solutions to today's problems, specifically with regard to squeezing the increased efficiency out of our current fuels, and therefore certainly impacting the emissions that go along with that. And then last but not least, we certainly heard the very interesting presentation from Mikhail and the solutions that are on the table potentially to address the challenges for the industry. So again, when we think about the tools and what levers we have to pull to solve some of those challenges, I think as an industry, we certainly have some viable solutions at our fingertips. And obviously over time, those are going to develop and mature further.
Mikhail, I have a quick question for you. I'm curious to know what sort of regulatory framework or challenges you think you're going to, or either you have or are going to have, and what sort of timeline you believe could exist for putting the MSR, for instance, on commercial shipping.
Well, thanks, Colleen. What most people don't realize are these frameworks, these regulatory frameworks actually exist today. They're a little dusty because they're not really applicable to any technology that's being used out there, but they were adopted unanimously by members of the United Nations and the IMO back in the 1970s and 80s. And there are several big conventions that set the rules for how you operate atomic vessels at sea. They're all applicable to old, sort of conventional nuclear technologies, but need to be brought up to date really to be reflective of the kind of changes that are going on today. So I don't think on the regulatory side it's particularly hard. It's also there are a lot of existing frameworks, inside the US and how that's operating in US waters. Same thing in the UK, the European Union, Japan, Korea, etc. All have specific rules for how this is done in territorial waters of each one of those countries. So that's not such a great challenge. Bilaterally, then, between countries that have these rules. So, for example, if the UK and the US decided that they wanted to allow traffic on MMSR-powered or advanced atomic-powered vessels between those two countries, that's not an issue for the IMO. That's a bilateral issue between the two under UNCLOS. So it's not really a question of what's there on the regulation side needs to be brought up to speed. I think it's really about, public opinion. People are talking about, is this acceptable? Is this politically acceptable? Is this something that the world will accept? And, Colin, to be frank, I think this is going to be absolutely politically acceptable. This is a safe, secure, tamper-free, or tamper-proof rather, technology that just doesn't pollute the environment. It provides all of the positive benefits, if you like, of the atom without the problems of old nuclear. And I think, it's a question of us all growing into this a little bit and leaving some of our preconceived ideas about what nuclear really is behind and looking into these new technologies. I'd say to everyone on this call and every call I ever go on that, try to leave those preconceived ideas behind and try to look at what's really going on and some of these new technologies that are coming up here and how it solves the problems we have rather than add to them. So politically, I think this is it's not quite not a shoe in this year, but it's absolutely coming.
Well, perfect. Thank you for answering that question. Maybe I will pass the floor over to Joe Hughes. And Joe,
well, indeed, thank you very much indeed.
Things up for us.
Absolutely fascinating. Yes, indeed. Thank you. Can you hear me, everyone?
I can indeed. Yes.
Good. Jolly good. Well, I've been sitting here in a state of rapture, actually, for the last 4 hours. Talk about putting the world to rights. We've covered such a wide range of really interesting subjects. I mean, this is one of the very best conferences I think we've had at NAMEPA. I'm just, gobsmacked, as they say, about the quality of the presentations. We've had superb speakers, illustrious moderators, peerless organizers, and an incomparable audience, it seems to me, this afternoon. And I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I really, really have. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating in, I think, what would be regarded as one of the signal events of NAMEPA's outreach in this context of doing conferences. Do think about joining NAMEPA. If you're not already a member, you should be. And you can find all the details of doing that on our website, which, of course, gives you a very good insight into what we do across a very, very wide range of activity. Everybody at NAMEPA, and particularly our staff, our secretariat, so ably led by Carleen, is driven by a passion for the marine environment. And there's nothing more important these days and nothing more relevant to the industry that we all serve in our different ways than preserving the integrity of our marine environment, than saving our seas. If you are interested too in the context of what we recently introduced as our CSR ESG, Environment, Social and Governance accreditation, the passport that we created some time ago, I do recommend looking at that very seriously too. The American Club and its managers, Shipowners Claims Bureau, went through that process some months ago. And it is arduous, it's exacting, but it's very, very useful. I'm pleased to say, as have people like Cargill and MSC and others, that we passed. I'm very pleased to say, actually, it would be somewhat embarrassing if we hadn't, but it's a really, really useful tool to gain insights into your operational standards in that particular context, and an accreditation that's very much, I would suggest, for the purpose of, you know, our mission, and also for your own business counterparties, very well worth having. And of course, as Carleen has said earlier, make sure that you vote early and vote often in regard for the Green for Sea Award for NAMEPA, which, as and when we win it, which I'm certain we will, fair and square, will be very much a sign of the work that we've done in this regard on ESG, CSR and so on, but which we do every day. And I want to pay tribute, as I said earlier, to everyone at NAMEPA on the Secretariat who works so hard to develop the programs that we have and generally spread the word, proselytize on behalf of the motive of saving our seas. So on that note, with many, many thanks again for all who participated and gave us the benefit of an extraordinary depth of knowledge about such an interesting range of subjects. Farewell for now. Thank you very much. Stay healthy, stay strong, and I very much hope that the next time that we're seeing each other, it will be in person rather than through this rather unnatural means of being in contact, but one that's been forced on us, of course, over the last 12 months or so. So you'll see us again soon. Keep in touch, and the very best to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you to all.
Thanks very much.